So before we wrap up for the day, let's talk about how people who intend to be writers themselves can make use of this book. Are there how-to lessons built into it, or what are the most useful ways of looking at this for a writer?
Well, I think that a good part of the book, if you have this the edition that we have,
Edition,
she adds at the end a reader's guide, and in that reader's guide, it's an interview from her husband's magazine, Smith Magazine, about the book. And she talks about her process of writing this book, and she says how it really did start as just a daily journal, and that's how her first draft went.
I thought she said she didn't keep a journal, unfortunately.
She does. That's what
I wrote and received many letters. A lot of my friends saved my letters.
It was a month by month. Every chapter was a month. That's how
She wrote it like it was.
On
Like it
page
was.
318, I've never been a daily diary person, but when I was in prison, I would occasionally write in a journal. And I wrote hundreds of letters.
And she used that occasional journal writing and her letters. And when she wrote her first draft, it was like a really like chronological kind of thing.
Page 320.
Where she talks about that. First draft I wrote was literally a month by month. Every chapter was a month. That was really helpful and intensive in terms of really cataloging experience. But I think it was a little painful to read. My editor, in one of her notes in the first draft, was like, "Here, I think you were trying to capture the incredible tedium." And I think that that's one way, I guess, people who...
It's gentle editing.
Yeah. And I think that that's...
You're probably being boring on purpose here, aren't you, dear?
But I think that was just a good way to write a first draft. Like, I need to really organize my thoughts on what happened, but it's not going to be a good thing to read because it's just going to be a month by month, this is what happened, which isn't going to be enjoyable.
From a writerly perspective, Kerman had some good luck in that a really unusual thing happened to her, something that's definitely worth writing about. People who don't have the luck to be sent away to prison for a year are going to have to somehow manufacture experiences in their own life.
Like Mary Roach.
It's going to be worth... Yes, exactly.
Mary Roach has to go out there and do that kind of stuff.
Shop for a story.
Yeah.
Certainly, if something does happen to you, take some notes.
I had postpartum depression, so that was a very hard thing to get through. And I still have my journals, and I go back and reflect on that, and it's been 8-9 years, and I still look at that writing, and it is full of emotion and full... And I say, this is really, really good, I think to myself, but it was that moment that was captured with those feelings. So, like you said, take note. If something out of the extraordinary, it wasn't...
very difficult to reconstruct later.
Exactly.
Yes. There are a lot of passages in this book that are neither scene nor synopsized action, but simple meditations, sort of timeless. In Chapter 8, although there are incidents in Chapter 8, a lot of it also consists on meditations on just a sort of the philosophy of prison, in a way. What power and punishment are like, different people's takes on power and punishment, how we ought to assess people. On page 120, there's this scene where Larry is visiting and tries to give her an extra kiss and gets slapped down by one of the guards. And so this is a scene, but right from the middle of that scene, she explains and meditates on the meanings of it. I understood on a visceral level, as he did not, that they really could end a visit and take all my visiting privileges away. Following page, Larry didn't understand that pushing boundaries in prison can have dire consequences. And in the same chapter, and this is not in a scene, it's just sort of free-floating, I saw young women who had been running wild in poverty most of their lives rail against authority, and middle-aged, middle-class women who were aghast to find themselves living among people they thought were beneath them. I thought they were all unnecessarily unhappy. I hated the control the prison exercised over my life, but the only way to fight it was in my own head. And I knew I wasn't better than any other woman locked up in there, even the ones I didn't like. So there are these little pockets of rumination scattered in almost every chapter, but Chapter 8 is particularly rich.
I believe you shouldn't write about something until you've fully understood it. And I think that when she wrote this, she fully understood all aspects of what happened to her.
I think Kerman is a very reflective person in general. I think this is just her personality. Some of the things that characterize her particular voice in this book is just... This is what she's like. She's a low-key, funny, ironic person who thinks about things a lot, before, during, and after they happen. But she was put in a position where she could make observations that most people don't get the chance to make. For me, some of the greatest reading pleasure in here is those meditative passages. These reflections on what is people's behavior like, and how do people behave when they have authority over people, or feel that they have the right to punish other people. In the passage that I read on page 124, she says she's not better than any other woman locked up in there. That's not my judgment. I think she's better than some of them. Not because she's white or middle class, or because her crime wasn't so big, or anything like that, but she has a fantastic personality, it seems to me. So kind, and the opposite of arrogant. I don't want to say modest, because she seems to me to have a fair amount of self-confidence.
And I think that what she tries to say in this book is that prison makes you sharpen those good qualities of yourself, because that's what's going to make people like you.
But it doesn't always. There are young women in there who keep fighting authority even though it's not going to do them any good, and that bad quality in them is being exacerbated by the prison system, not improved. And the same thing for the women who feel superior, and oh my God, how did I get here with all these low class?
But she also mentions it going back to Nora in the last chapter, where she says all the positive. All the positive things that she found in Nora were sharpened by being in prison. That the stuff that she liked about her was stronger, and it outshined the negative parts of Nora that she didn't like. So I think that in a way she does believe that either
it had a good effect on her.
Yeah, but some people it doesn't.
In other words, it was an education in the prison system.
She doesn't think that this is the average outcome, because if she did, she wouldn't be agitating for prison reform, which she most certainly is. She doesn't think that prisons as they exist now are rehabilitative, or that they're providing some benefit to society which is worth what they're costing.
And she mentions that in the last line of her.
Yes.
She mentions that how
in the last line of the afterward
because
she kind of does say that in the last line of the afterwards, page 299.
Yes,
the last thing she says is, "We will turn this prison from a scrap heap into a repair shop."
So I really like that line. That last line really nailed it for me.
It's a quote from Thomas Mott Osborne,
who was the warden of the New York Sing prison.
It's a really good, nice quote.
That's beautiful. Excuse me, but I still have my brain stuck back in chapter 8. The title of this chapter is "So Bitches Can Hate." And that's describing the attitude of one young woman in there who's thinking about looking forward to being married to a good man, so that she can go back to her neighborhood and show him off, and that she has been a success, and here she's got this great marriage, specifically for the purpose of rubbing other people's noses in the fact that she turned out better than they did. So that, to me, the very chapter title is a demonstration that some people are pettier than others, and Piper Kerman is one of the less petty in there.
Because we don't know how her relationship with this one prisoner is, how that relationship is between her fiance, and that one prisoner. But we know that Piper's relationship with Larry is very strong, but Piper never goes around talking about it.
She's
rubbing it on other people's faces.
She would never say, my goal here is to make it so bitches can hate.
No, that's
not her.
And she was always shocked when people wanted to hear about what happened, about her fiancé.
Yes.
She was really surprised that people cared.
Another incident of interest in that chapter is when this other prisoner she's given, all these names are changed, I guess, or almost all of them, not hers and Larry's, but everybody else. The prisoner she calls Lionel, who pulls some kind of strings behind the scenes somehow so that Piper can get the radio that she wants, they've refused to get for her for weeks and months, but the prisoner makes it happen, and she has some surprise about that at first. Page 128. It was funny how things worked around here, how other prisoners could make things happen. So there are the ranks and positions that people have nominally, and then there are other somehow ranks that they establish for themselves that are sort of outside the system, or the unwritten rules rather than the written rules.
And that can be seen also in the chapter Mothers and Daughters.
Yes.
Where she talks about how There are people who are the mothers who have children, and she was Pop's child.
Yes.
Very good, yes.
And that they celebrate during Mother's Day, which I thought was really, really a nice...
Well, everything that they do for their birthdays and all that, oh my gosh, I was really surprised that all of that, like they really make it a point of celebrating, even just like we do. You know, Halloween.
Trying to make it like we do.
How they dressed up and how they made the most innovative costumes from
I'm a pimp.
Yeah, I'm a pimp and stuff like that. I found that very interesting.
Last words?
It's nothing like the show. Read it. Don't say I've watched the show and say that's enough. It's not. And I've seen the show.
The TV show is just a story.
And I'm not saying it's not entertaining, but the book is really good. And it's a different experience, and so people should read it.
I like the book much better than I like the TV show, although I liked the TV show well enough. I think it's pretty well done with pretty good writing and pretty good acting, but the book is the real thing.
Yeah.
I liked the book. I just thought it was an interesting issue being presented in a not... It wasn't pushed on you, the issue of prison reform, so I liked that.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. And for me, that was what, at the end of the reading, that's what I took home. That's what I understood and said, okay, this is what it is. This is what needs to get done. I don't know if it'll happen, just like with education, public education, and all the other issues we have, but I thought it was very well done.
Anybody who writes a memoir gets to choose exactly where they're going to position themselves on a sort of a spectrum of this is purely personal experience, or this is purely political argument, or I'm somewhere in between 0 and 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And she's chosen to play it pretty close to the personal end of the spectrum. But it is clear that she does have opinions about what our public policy should be, and she's quite upfront about it.
But the fact that she uses that personal experience is what gives the reader the buy-in of the prison reform.
Well, I think that the personal can interweave with the political.
Yes.
And this is a perfect example on how her personal story is very important to the bigger, broader issue of prison reform.
There are probably people who are going to be annoyed by the political message in this book.
I don't think it's so established, or it undermines the 1 year in the prison that, you know, I even think of, you know, does it really take away from the story, from the actual 1 year of... It doesn't. For me, it doesn't. Then, but like you said, every person is a different, you know, any connection, you know, we're all different. So maybe they will be upset about the fact that she includes that last, as part of, like, she mentions right before the interview, you have that whole, about 10 pages of, or more, of the resources, the justice reform resources. So there might be people that I just looked at it, glanced at it, but it didn't.
For people who are currently making their livelihood from the status quo of the war on drugs,
They may not.
this book is an assault on.
Yes.
But I think that there are some things, I mean, even if you don't agree with what Piper wants done to the prison system, there are some things in here, like, maybe we should at least fix some of the conditions in the prison, not make them so horribly to live in.
Right.
I mean, he may not agree, like, we need a complete reform, but she does mention things that I think that even if you are okay with the current system, that needs to be fixed.
No matter how disagreeable politically somebody might find this book, they have to acknowledge that she's got the right to tell her story,
Yes.
and that she has the authority to say a few things about what prison is like, at least the corner of the prison system that she herself is. So I think that she is being careful to stay under the radar in a certain way, to not get people riled up. But I also think that it's true that she has a definite thesis. The way we're doing this now is not the right way.
And she makes a convincing argument. I mean, she really pushed me towards her side a little bit more. I mean, I was always on the fence, and I'm not saying that now I'm completely over the fence, but I have moved closer to her side because of her book.